take two. I was interrupted, so I'm going to start over. This is the rest of chapter 1 of Love's Next Door. When her body temperature finally felt like it had returned to normal, she pulled the plug from the bathtub, letting the lukewarm water escape as she lifted her body up and wrapped herself in a thick white towel. After drying off, Stacy slipped her favorite pink flannel nightgown over her head and picked up her clothes. She carried them to the laundry room just off the kitchen and dumped them into the waiting basket that sat by the washer. She stood at the window for a moment, watching the snow swirl around the distant streetlights, happy that she was back in Winter Falls. She loved living in Winter Falls, a small town with no skyscrapers or four-lane highways. She had grown up in this small-knit community. It was a pleasant, friendly place to live, but unfortunately not close enough to the city for an easy commute. When her parents had moved away, Stacy had decided to stay behind. Only once had she migrated away from Winter Falls, and that was when she accepted her current job, which required a move to the city where she had lived for the past year. But she had missed her house and the small-town atmosphere, so she cleverly figured out a way to keep her job and move back home. She was the editor and guiding force behind a new book publishing venture. The funding had been raised and the employees hired. The stack of manuscripts forwarded from her proofreaders had doubled in size just in the past week, and now her primary responsibility was to find and develop the next Pulitzer Prize-winning author. Her boss, who was computer shy, required a considerable amount of convincing, but after seeing the power of electronic mail, he wisely gave his approval for Stacy to work from her home in Winter Falls. Little did he realize how important this decision was to Stacy. Most of the people she had grown up with had moved from Winter Falls to make their own way in the world, and most never came back. Stacy knew that she wanted out of her life, and Winter Falls was exactly what she needed. Stacy knew what she wanted out of life. Winter Falls was exactly what she needed and where she was going to stay. The house belonged to her parents. It was the same house she grew up in and loved. Besides the luxury of having 3 bedrooms, there was a huge furnished basement which had been a great party room during her teens and was now her office. Here and there throughout the house her parents had left furnishings that did not quite fit into the condo at the lake. Each and every piece of furniture held a happy memory for Stacy. The little wicker table and chairs in front of the living room window where her dad patiently helped her put puzzles together and later taught her to play gin rummy. The maple harvest table in the kitchen, big enough for her mom to lay out patterns from prom dresses she made for Stacy, and the walnut cedar chest in her bedroom filled with her grandmother's table linens. She let her mind wander for a moment, savoring her memories as she stood looking out the window at the swirling winds of the snowstorm. Moving to the kitchen, she pulled a mug down from the cupboard and began making a cup of hot chocolate, floating a few marshmallows on top. She carried her hot drink to the bedroom, turning on the bedside lamp, and placed her mug on the old walnut chest beside her bed. Pulling back the blankets, she crawled underneath the warm covers, fluffing the pillows behind her neck. With a small twinge of guilt, she grabbed her briefcase from beside the bed and placed it on her lap. She opened her most current manuscript, put on her reading glasses, and continued with her task where she had left off earlier in the afternoon. She loved her job. Reading was one of her favorite pastimes, and editing was the perfect job for her. She had always been a stickler for spelling and grammar, and credited her love of language in parts to all those hours spending word games with her parents. She was delighted to be working from home and communicating with the office by telephone, computer, and electronic mail. So far, the trial arrangement was working well, and best of all, every day could be a casual Friday. Stacy should have known better than to seriously expect to accomplish any reading this late at night, especially after the fresh air, exercise, and excitement of the last few hours. Within moments, the words on the page began to blur together. She looked up from the document that sat in her lap and let out a huge yawn. She had hoped to finish one more chapter before nodding off, but it was no use. She was totally exhausted. Heidi lay curled against her side, snoring softly, head tucked under paw, as if to let Stacy know the light was bothersome. "I have to get some sleep too, Heidi," she murmured, returning the manuscript to her briefcase and sliding it back beside the bed. As she turned out the light, she couldn't help but smile as she contemplated her escapade and wondered how Justin would react. in a few short hours when he opened his front door. With that amusing thought on her mind, she pulled the covers around her head, closed her eyes, and fell asleep. I don't believe it. When I get my hands on her, I'm going to kill her. Justin was ranting and raving like a wild man. What are you going on about, darling? Cheryl said, coming down the stairs to meet her lover, pulling a soft green sweater over her head, careful not to mess up her exquisitely groomed auburn hair. Who are you going to kill? She asked, confused. Justin ran his hands through his short brown hair in frustration, knowing Cheryl would hit the roof, not only because the doors were blocked, but because she would now know what he had known for a week. Stacy was back in town. He produced the note from his pocket and showed it to her. Cheryl took the piece of paper from his hands, turning away to read it, her face immediately flushed with anger. She knew who the letter was from without even asking. The one person in this godforsaken place who could ruin her relationship with Justin. Stacy. She liked Stacy about as much as she liked living in this hellhole of a town. For the past 8 months, she and Justin had been dating, and everything was going according to plan. Her scheme was to move in with Justin and then convince him to sell his dilapidated excuse of a house and move to the city, where the action was. From that point on, she would work on him until he proposed. Although she hadn't moved in with him yet, she was spending a great deal of time in his house, and little by little leaving more of her clothes in his closet. Now that Stacy was back, Cheryl was certain she would certainly have to watch her step, because Stacy and Justin were such good friends, too close for comfort. They had dated in high school, and Cheryl had to admit Stacy was cute, smart, and well-liked by everybody. Justin just seemed to like her too damn much. She decided to play it cool. Cheryl pulled her face into a smile and turned back to Justin. She was careful not to show her anger. Now, Justin, I'm sure she won't be pulling any of her crazy stunts. After all, Stacy has been away for a long time. She's likely forgotten about the foolish little feud. Is that so? Well, come over here and see what she's done. His gaze lingered on the door, and when he walked over to it and opened it, see for yourself. Cheryl peeked over his shoulder. What in the world? Then she ran to the back of the house. It's no good. She got that one too, he said as he followed her. How the hell am I supposed to get out of here? She yelled. I need to go home. I have to go to work. Justin watched as she ran around in a flurry. Calm down, Cheryl. I need you to put on your coat, climb up the window, and dislodge some of the snow so we can get out of here. Then I can drive you home. She looked at him in disbelief. You want me to climb out the window and do what? She asked in shock. That stuff's turned into ice. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Justin took a deep breath. He loved Cheryl, but if there was one thing he could change, if he could, it would be her selfish, spoiled attitude. She loved to dress in only the finest clothes, and found the thought of any physical activity repulsive. Can you see me trying to get out? He questioned her. There's no way I could fit through any of these windows, and I'm not about to jump out of a second-story window and break my neck. Damn that Stacy, she thought to herself. I'm going to get even with her for this. She took a deep breath and with great effort smiled as sweetly as possible before answering. You're right. I'm sorry. Let me put on my coat and boots, and I'll get to it. Justin leaned over and kissed her pretty lips in appreciation. Thanks, sweetie. I'll make this up to you. Then he went to the kitchen and put on a pot of coffee. How about tonight? She said over her shoulder as she moved to the closet to retrieve her coat. What about tonight? He asked, coming back through the living room. How about making it up to me by taking me out to dinner tonight? She said, never one to miss an opportunity to be wined and dine. Justin helped Cheryl into her coat, opened the window, and took her hand to help her out. That would be great, but it will have to be after 6. I have a late meeting tonight. No problem. She kissed him and climbed awkwardly out the window, cursing Stacy under her breath. The ringing of the telephone startled Stacy. She reached out from under the covers and grabbed the receiver. Hello, she said in a sleep-laced voice. So you're back. You should have sure delivered your message in an original way. The voice seemed to waver between annoyance and amusement. Stacy peered through her half-closed eyelids and looked at the clock on the stand. With a groan, she read 6:15. She rolled over and buried her head under the covers, hoping the dimwit on the other end would hang up and let her get back to sleep. Stacy, wake up. I want to talk to you, Justin shouted. Not now, Sugar Lance. I'm tired. Then she hung up the phone, pushed the ringer to off, and buried her head in the pillows once again. That is the end of Chapter 1. So we'll learn more tomorrow.